Hey there and welcome back to Rimworld. My name is Pete and today we complete episode 8 of our Rimworld Ice Sheet Survival series. First things first, I quickly talked about this in the last episode and it seems like all of you were in favor of it as well, and so I have installed the first mod of this playthrough. The mod in question is the Miniaturisation Mod, which allows us to reinstall objects that were previously not movable, objects for example like the workbench here. Since pawns in vanilla Rimworld are already able to haul around beds and tables, I think they should also be able to reinstall butcher tables or workbenches, especially in scenarios like ours where resources are scarce and you don't really have the option to constantly rebuild everything. So our first order of business here will be to reinstall both the lamp and the research bench. We'll move them both inside of Cambiar's bedroom for the moment. Eventually though, we will probably build a separate research room. Now, because research is one of those tasks that always takes a bit of time, we are also going to upgrade from a stool to a dining chair. The dining chair is a bit more comfortable compared to the stool, and if Cambiar is able to build one here that is of solid quality, that should also have a positive effect on his mood. By the way, as you can see here, Cambiar is still struggling with the infection from the last episode, but we are once again safely building up an immunity, so I don't think there is a need for another use of medicine at the moment. The dining chair then actually turned out to be a good quality one, and that is very nice indeed. With a comfort rating of 0.77, this will now be a very comfortable thing for Cambiar to sit on, and as we can see here, it does give him the +6 very comfortable thought. So, that is the research bench taken care of, but of course there is one more thing that we really need to take care of in this episode, and that is to build a butcher table. And now that we can freely reinstall the thing, we don't really have to worry much about where to place it, so to get started we will put it right next to our little storage room. This now costs us 20 of the 100 wood we have, which is another reason why I'm very happy that we don't have to build a second one soon. Now we're also going to move the table, the stool and the crafting spot right over here next to the butcher table, because the butchered meat will eventually be stored inside of our storage room, and so having a table close by will save Cambiar a bit of walking time. Now the butcher table is constructed, Cambiar is hauling everything in place, let's butcher our first creature. For that we're going to set up a bill here to butcher one single creature. We don't want to go overboard in the beginning, we still have a bit of research to do. And we'll also tell Cambiar to drop the chopped meat on the floor, which is a lot more time efficient if you're chopping up multiple corpses in a row. We will also restrict him to human-like corpses for this bill, and then we can watch him go to work. Once Cambiar is finished, he will immediately start to consume the chopped up human meat here, and that gives him the already familiar raw cannibalism thought for a +20 boost to his mood. However, it no longer gives him the -8 corpse thought, which is normally applied at least twice when feeding directly from a corpse, so normally it is at least a -14 mood penalty. Instead, we now only receive a mild -7 from the 8 raw food thought. Now, chopping up the corpse has several other advantages as well. Number one, we now not only receive meat for nutrition, but also leather for crafting. And especially human leather is worth quite a bit in the Rimworld market, and so are items made from it. It doesn't offer the best cold protection though, and we also haven't researched complex clothing yet, so the crafting process will have to wait for a while. The other advantage of chopping up a body is that less meat goes to waste when eating, because the meat is now chopped up into smaller portions, and so your colonists will take only what they need. Now for Cambiar, it is now back to research, however not for long. After just a few moments we have completed our current research project, and with that we have now unlocked Microelectronics Basics. Now this is a very important research because it gives us access to the high-tech research bench, which is needed for all the advanced technology, but it also now allows us to build a comms console and an Orbital Trade Beacon. Now we'll talk about that in a moment. For now let's focus on our next research project, which is going to be the one I just mentioned, complex clothing. Like the name already suggests, this allows us to craft clothing, and that is one of the things I have planned for this episode, because remember in the last episode we bought some Megasloth Wool, and with the butcher table we will now also have a steadily increasing supply of leather coming in. Costing us only 1000 points, complex clothing will be a relatively quick research project to finish, so we'll quickly throw it in here to give Cambiar a few more options clothing-wise. Cambiar's infection is, just like last time, progressing to extreme stages here, so it will temporarily render him unable to move, but once his immunity is fully built up, the infection will slowly disappear. Alright, here we are. Cambiar has reached immunity, and that will now cause the seriousness of the infection to slowly drop back down. A short while later, he's up and walking again, ready to grab breakfast on the first day of summer. Yes, Cambiar has survived long enough to experience his second summer out here on the ice sheet, and that means 30 more days where the cold will very likely not be a problem for us. Now, speaking of the cold, or rather the lack thereof, this is something I quickly want to talk about. I mentioned earlier that we now have the option to build a comms console and an orbital trade beacon. However, despite having the miniaturization mod, the comms console is one of those objects that cannot be moved despite having the mod installed, so ideally we only put it in place once we have our small mountain base dug out a bit more. The issue with doing that now is the ever-looming threat of infestation, especially now in the summer where even inside of the mountain temperatures will very likely rise to above -17 degrees. Every room inside of a mountain that is warmer than that has a chance of spawning an infestation, and since even a small infestation can be an absolute colony killer in this game, I would really like to avoid that. Now, even though it is set to -25 degrees, our heater is understandably not able to cool our room down further. To achieve that, we would need coolers, which are a separate research project. And I would like to play it safe in that regard and only dig deeper into the mountains once either the outside temperatures drop or we have coolers researched. Yes, having a proper base is something that Cambiar more than deserves at this point, but I don't want to live with the risk of this playthrough ending all of a sudden because of an infestation that spawns right in Cambiar's living room. That is also why the butcher table stays outside for the moment, that way we don't have to clean up as often and I can live with the small work speed penalty. Now, with Cambiar slowly getting hungry and only one piece of meat left in storage, we will once again tell him to start butchering. After all, he still has one more human corpse left to process. The animal corpses will probably follow in one of the next few days, but for the moment I would like Cambiar to stay focused on his research. For the rest of this day, however, he will fill his joy meter by watching the sunset, and afterwards he can go to bed. After getting up and having breakfast, Cambiar is now already sitting back down in front of the research bench, and in the early afternoon his infection finally disappears. And this now actually gives him a sizable boost to his mood, because resulting from the infection he had two small negative thoughts, the sick and in a little pain thought, both of them applying -5 penalties to Cambiar's mood. With the infection gone, his mood will now jump up by 10 points, which is a sizable increase, and combined with the other positive thoughts he already has, makes Cambiar a happy man. Then, while Cambiar is once again sitting down to eat, we have the first event of the episode, and it is a positive one. A bunch of cargo pods have crashed, and they have spilled some capybara meat. And while our food situation is looking somewhat relaxed at the moment, we still want to haul all of this back. We never know what kind of disaster Randy Random is holding in store for us, and so stocking up on some more food supplies is generally speaking never a bad thing. Now we have 100 units of meat here. Cambiar, however, can only carry 75 at a time, and I was thinking about having him take only one trip, but like I said, I don't really want to get too complacent, so I think it's better to have him take the extra trip here, even though we might be able to do without it. Once everything is safely hauled into storage, Cambiar can then go to bed, and we rejoin him on the next day. And it's already late in the evening as Cambiar leaves the research bench to have dinner here, and I have actually forbidden the human meat for this meal, simply because Cambiar's mood is so high at the moment that he doesn't really need the cannibalism boost on top. And since we're also out of human corpses to butcher at the moment, this preserves a bit of precious human meat for later. On the next morning then, Cambiar finishes the complex clothing research project, and that means we are now able to build a tailor bench and craft our own clothing. There are two versions of that bench in the game, an electric tailor bench and the hand tailor bench, and I am going with the hand tailor bench for the beginning here. Yes, working on that bench will take a bit longer, but we're not depending on electricity to do so, and with only one wind turbine in place, our power supply is also not what I would call steady. The tailor bench can then go inside of our old shack here, that way it won't get any work speed penalties from being outside. After all, we don't need to stretch the process out any longer than it has to be. So, the Tailor bench is finished, let's add our first bill. And the clothing item that we are going to craft here is a Parka. The Parka is the item with the highest cold protection in the game, and making one out of Megasloth Wool, the wool with the highest cold protection in the game, that allows us now to craft an absolute cold killer. As you can see here, we need 120 units of Megasloth Wool to craft a Parka, and conveniently enough, that is also exactly how much we bought. So, let's get things started and have Cambiar craft himself a Megasloth Wool Parka. While he's doing so, we are once again interrupted by a cry for help. We have another refugee being chased by tribespeople here, and as usual, we will offer our help. This means an entirely naked Dave now joins the colony, and with the temperatures outside being only a mild -8 degrees, he might actually have a chance to make it back to the base before succumbing to hypothermia. And here are now his attackers, the already familiar group of 4 tribespeople, and with our defenses reliably able to take out at least 2 of those, we shouldn't have much to worry about here. Alright, the group is now approaching, that means we'll put Cambiar in position behind our defenses. Most likely, however, he will not have to do any actual fighting. That task is a privilege for Dave though, who of course is not expected to survive the day anyway, so he might as well do a bit of damage in the process. And we'll also not give him any clothing or weapons. Later on, that would only result in unnecessary hauling for Cambiar. So, here are the attackers now, let's see how this fight plays out. Alright, and Dave actually just killed an enemy with his fists. Admittedly, the guy survived 2 deadfall traps beforehand, but an impressive display nonetheless. Eventually though, Dave himself goes down. He doesn't die though, and so our enemies decide to simply recapture him and be on their way. Not before one of them goes down to another deadfall trap though, and also not before we can send Cambiar to pursue. And Cambiar lands an incredible one-shot kill here on the attacker that was carrying Dave, and so even though one of the attackers escapes, we now have 4 bodies to add to our stockpile. 2 are dead already, the other 2 are in the process of dying, and believe me, Cambiar won't do anything about that. Instead, he can start rearming the deadfall traps and haul the loot back to the storage room. With all the equipment safely stored away, Cambiar can then have something to eat late at night, and while he's on his way to bed, Dave is the first to succumb to his injuries. He dies of hypothermia, and that means Cambiar quickly has to get back up again, so that he can safely carry the corpse back inside of the base. The next morning then starts with breakfast and another crashed cargo pod, this one containing psychoid leaves. Now, as you might already be able to guess from the name, psychoid leaves are used in drug production, and while at the moment I don't really want Cambiar to use any drugs, selling them is still a great way to make money, so we definitely want to haul back everything here. Conveniently enough, we have just over 150 leaves lying around, and that means with 2 trips of 75 leaves each, we should be able to bring back almost everything. Going back for only 3 leaves is then not really worth it. While Cambiar makes his first trip back to the base, we also have a group of visitors arriving, and they do seem to have some items to trade. So Randy Random is very generous with us in this episode. 2 nice cargo drops already, and now a group of traders on top. Hopefully they have a few good things to sell. Alright, not a spectacular inventory by any means, but we'll buy the 1 unit of herbal medicine the trader has available, and then we'll sell most of our unused weapons and equipment, not all because the trader sadly can't afford to buy all of them, but enough to pay for the medicine and turn a bit of a profit. Cambiar can then proceed to haul back the second batch of psychoid leaves, and the medicine and silver that we just traded for can also find their way back to the stockpile. After a full night of rest and a filling breakfast, we now rejoin Cambiar on the next day, and we can see him clean up a bit around the base, stripping corpses and rearming deadfall traps. It doesn't take long though until we're once again gifted with a generous event here. Another group of traders passes by, so let's see what they have to offer. Alright, these guys have proper medicine for sale, and I think we're going to buy all 4 of those, and I think we're also going to sell all of the surplus equipment here, maybe apart from another bow and the pistol. And yeah, that allows us to afford 4 units of medicine, and we even receive 20 silver on top. Okay, I don't know if you were able to catch that, but one of the visitors actually triggered a trap just a second ago. This now has him bleeding pretty heavily here, and if he receives no medical attention, he will die in 11 hours. I think that is still more than enough to make it off the map, just goes to show you what can happen if you're not careful around our defenses. Back inside of the base, I have now queued up several butchering jobs for Cambiar. With the new influx of human corpses, we can get Cambiar some human meat back on the menu. After all, he hasn't had some for a few days now. Once the meat and leather are then safely in storage, Cambiar can finally continue making his Parka, and hopefully he can finish it without any further distractions. The next morning then once again starts with a promising event. Cambiar becomes inspired with a shoot frenzy, and that means increased shooting accuracy for the next 3 days. That could be interesting should we have another fight on our hands. First of all though, Cambiar is finally able to finish crafting the Parka here. Sadly though, it is only of poor quality. Still, the cold protection on it is an insane minus 111 degrees, so despite an unfortunate deterioration rate we will equip it, and with that Cambiar's temperature concerns should be gone once and for all. Up next we will construct a quick tweak to our defenses, consisting only of a single steel door. This steel door will be a defense mechanism primarily aimed at manhunter animals. Normally it will stay open all the time, allowing both visitors and raiders to pass through and into our defenses, but since manhunting animals do not break down doors, we can simply close the door once one appears on the map and let the animal frenzy around on the outside. For now though, we'll leave it open, otherwise someone might decide to smash it. Up next on Cambiar's to-do list is then another big batch of butchering. Now it's time for the animals. 3 snow hares, a muffalo and the polar bear will not only increase our food, but also our leather supplies. By the way, let me know in the comments what you think we should do with all the leather. We could try and craft something that is useful for Cambiar, or we could go for maximum profit and craft something that we can sell. Now, with Cambiar hauling everything back into storage, I quickly noticed something. Remember the guy who triggered our trap earlier? That's him, dead right here. Now, I'm not quite sure how he died. Maybe it was the bleeding, maybe he got into a social fight. Be that as it may, his companions have moved on, and we now have a corpse, a pistol, and 2 simple meals ripe for the taking. And so even though Cambiar should probably go to sleep soon, let's haul those back. Better to grab what we can before somebody else does. The next day then passes by without any further incidents. That is until we are visited by another raiding party who attack immediately. We have 4 guys coming at us, however all of them are only equipped with melee weapons, so Cambiar and his bow definitely have the advantage here, especially considering that Cambiar is still inspired with his shooting frenzy. So for a change, we're not waiting for the attackers to come to us, but instead move out. Let's see if we can't put that increased shooting accuracy to work. Alright, lovely. I think Cambiar didn't miss a single shot here. Now, however, it's time for the retreat. I don't really want him to get caught up in a melee. The 2 guys in pursuit make it into our defenses and unsurprisingly don't make it out alive, and that immediately convinces the other 2 to flee. We will also not pursue this time, we probably don't have a chance of catching them anyway. Instead, we can haul back the 2 guys who fell victim to our traps. With the bodies on the stockpile, the equipment in the storage room and the traps reset, we can now focus on research again, because I think it is time for some air conditioning. I mentioned this earlier, coolers will play a vital role in our strategy to avoid infestations. Without them, I don't really dare to build a full-sized mountain base just yet, so let's have Cambiar pick up air conditioning as his next research project. Just a few hours after starting with the research, however, we received cargo pods for the third time in this episode. This time, however, the contents are not that useful. We now have 161 sandstone blocks here on the map, but I think I already said this in episode 1, sandstone isn't the most durable material in Rimworld, and we're also not in the middle of any big building projects. So since sandstone doesn't deteriorate when left outside, we'll do exactly that. We'll leave it there, but keep it in mind should we need it later. Then, while Cambiar is asleep, we receive another act of kindness from Randy Random. A Psychic Soothe will now provide Cambiar with a nice plus 15 mood boost, and that, I believe for the first time in this playthrough, maxes out his mood at 100. So a truly happy Cambiar now sits down in front of the research bench, and he actually doesn't do anything else of note for the next 3 days, so we rejoin Cambiar roughly 72 hours later, as he successfully finishes the research for air conditioning. Now, this finally puts us in an excellent spot to plan our mountain base, but that will of course take a bit of time, so it won't happen in this episode. Overall, I think life out on the ice sheet for Cambiar is progressing pretty nicely. I remember saying in the first episode that food, temperature and defense will be our 3 main priorities, and I think at least on an individual level we have somewhat solved those issues. Now we can slowly but steadily shift our focus on the greater whole, so the base itself, focusing less on temperature management for Cambiar and more on temperature management for the entire base. And we could also slowly start thinking about how we might be able to build up a small food supply, because a second colonist could be a tremendous help. But of course, let's not get ahead of ourselves at this point. We have made some nice progress in this episode, and I hope we can continue where we left off in the next one. Until then, leave a thumbs up if you liked the video, and if you want to support the channel and haven't subscribed already, then go ahead and feel free to do so. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.